Hello and welcome back to FATBOSS TV. Today we're looking at the first boss in the new Crucible of Storms raid coming out in a few weeks, the Restless Cabal.
Yes, this single phase boss has you fighting against two bosses with separate health pools. Throughout the fight, the bosses will empower relics found throughout the room which trigger powerful spells which will very quickly wipe you if you do not counter them correctly. So let's jump straight into it and talk about these relics.
So when a boss reaches 75, 50 or 25% health, they will empower the relic that they are closest to, triggering a powerful spell and giving that boss a permanent 10% damage increase, leading to them each having a 30% damage increase by the end of the fight after using all three relics. Each relic in the room is different and provides a unique powerful spell that you need to counter. The Void Stone gives the boss who empowered it a large damage absorption shield. Whilst this shield holds, the entire raid will be completely immune to healing. You've just got to make sure that everyone focuses the boss with a shield as soon as possible just to make the raid healable again. And you'll also want to make sure that everyone is topped before the healing immunity is applied. The Trident of the Deep Ocean will create a large bubble shield around it for 20 seconds. This shield has a health pool which can be seen on the boss frames. 75% of damage taken by enemies within the shield will be redirected towards it. When the shield expires, it will deal damage to the raid equal to its remaining health, basically one-shotting you if you didn't do enough damage to it. You need to make sure that both bosses are within the shield whilst it's up so it can be destroyed before it times out. The Tempest Cooler will deal ticking damage to your raid over 15 seconds, which also reduces the damage you deal by 50%. If anyone drops below 25% health whilst this is up and takes any damage from this, they will instantly die. You need to make sure that you keep everyone topped up throughout this using healing cooldowns just to make sure nobody drops below that 25% threshold. So as you can see, all three relics are a pain in the arse, but you could argue that some are worse than the others, so you could just maybe make the bosses use the same one every single time. However, the issue with that, if a boss uses a relic more than once, they will gain a 300% damage increase, which pretty much wipes you. Now each boss will also summon adds whenever it uses a relic. Thazar'alor the Feared will summon 3 Eldritch Abominations. These will cast Witness the End, which causes them to die and deal damage to the entire raid, whilst also applying a debuff which increases the damage you take from the cast by 100% for 6 seconds. You need to make sure that you stagger the times in which this ability is cast, because if all 3 of them go off at the same time, you're pretty much going to be one-shot. So you'll want to let one of the adds just cast it all the way through so it instantly dies, whilst you interrupt the other 2. As soon as the debuff is dropped, you can then let another add do it, and once that debuff is dropped, you can let the final add do it. Now as these adds spawn during a relic spell, you may need to interrupt all 3 adds at the same time just to make sure the raid doesn't die, such as during the Tempest Cooler ticking damage or the Void Stone healing immunity. As for the other boss, the Speaker, he will summon a Visage from Beyond add. This add will just attempt to cast Terrifying Echo, which will do a burst of damage and fear everyone if the 15-second cast goes through. You need to kill the add to interrupt the cast, however the add will start to regenerate at an ever-increasing rate once it reaches 1 HP, and will begin to cast again once he reaches full health. So you need to kill the add each time it goes back to full health until it despawns 3 minutes later. You can also cleave and multi-dot the add whilst it's up, so you don't need to focus damage into it as often. So that's the most complicated part of the fight out of the way. Let's go through the boss abilities real quick.
So the Feared will cast Sheer Mind on the tank, dealing a burst of damage and applying a 10% stat reduction debuff to them which can stack. Tanks simply just need to taunt off each other whenever their debuff drops, usually around the 3 to 4 stack mark. The Feared will also cast Void Crash, which marks an area with a big shadow circle. If you're within the circle when it detonates, you'll just take some damage and the circle will despawn. If you aren't within the circle, it'll bounce up in the air and mark a new area with a smaller circle. After 2 bounces, it gets to the smallest size it ever will be, and will then just continue to bounce around until it hits somebody. You just want to have one person soak any given Void Crash zone to remove it, which helps reduce overall raid movement, because otherwise you're just going to be dodging a ton of Void Crash zones throughout the fight. Just be careful during high incoming damage points, as the crash and the other source of damage might one-shot you if you're not topped up. Lastly, this boss applies Crushing Doubt debuffs to 2 players, dealing ever-increasing ticking damage and slowing movement by 25% for 12 seconds. When the debuff expires, those players will explode, dealing fall-off damage to the raid. So if you get the debuff, make sure you move away from the raid so that the damage everyone takes is reduced. Healers will need to pay extra attention to these debuffs, as the explosion combined with other things such as adds exploding or the Tempest Cooler relic ticking damage can combo people quite easily. So moving over to the Speaker, instead of melee hitting, this boss will spam cast a Photic Blast at whoever has threat. This deals a burst of shadow damage to the player and anyone within 5 yards, and this damage is reduced heavily the further the target is from the boss. The interesting thing is that this leaves a debuff on players hit for 30 seconds, which increases threat generation by 150%. With this in mind, you want to have a single range DPS tank this mob. They should gain threat of it at the beginning of the fight whilst everyone else ignores it. Once they've gotten the threat increasing debuff and have some good damage on that mob, then everyone can start damaging it again. Healers will need to keep this player topped up as if they were a tank, and tanks should avoid ripping threat off of this mob as the 5-yard splash might kill off melee players. Now, if the threat gen debuff ever expires on a player, they will become permanently hostile to allies. Now, this isn't a mind control effect, instead they cannot receive healing and they can be attacked, and they can attack you back. It's like they just put PvP on and you can all fight each other. Obviously, this is a terrible thing to have happen in a raid when you're all supposed to be working together, so whoever is assigned to tank this boss should always make sure that they are always at least 5 yards away from other people, so that the debuff is never applied to anyone else. Now, the speaker will also occasionally cast a frontal cone faced at a random player. If you're hit by this, you take some damage and become hostile to allies for 4 seconds. Just make sure you move from it, and if anyone is hit by accident, you want to avoid splashing damage onto them. Now, the last ability in this boss's kit is the Dark Herald debuff. This marks a random player and causes them to apply the Promises of Power debuff to all players within 5 yards every 5 seconds. Now, Promises of Power is similar to the debuff found on the last boss in the Shrine of the Storm 5-man, as it increases your damage done, but reduces your maximum health. It will stack by itself over time to a cap of 9, making you do 90% more damage, but with 90% less health. Obviously, this debuff is super powerful, but it's also very, very risky. Any player with high stacks during the Tempest Caller AoE, or when an ad explodes, or even when a Crushing Doubt debuff expires could easily just be one-shot, so they will need to be dispelled before this damage comes in. On Heroic, dispelling this debuff deals damage to the Dispeller, so using things like Master Spells or Revival will just likely one-shot whoever casts the Dispel, so you will need to limit the amount of people that have the debuff at any given time. But that's more or less the encounter. You just have to get the bosses to each activate 3 unique relics whilst dealing with the ads they spawn and the abilities they throw your way. And one last note, you do need to get both of these bosses to 1 HP within around 20 seconds of each other to end the fight, as otherwise they'll heal straight back up to 20% health. But moving into our feedback, what do we think?
Well, this fight is all about options, which is really nice, as well as there's a bit of a risk vs reward aspect, which is really cool. The fact that you need to choose what order you want to trigger the relics is really nice. I mean, potentially there might be one order that's better for one raid composition in comparison to another one. I don't think that would necessarily be the case. For the most part, it just seems like you want to trigger the Tempest Caller one first and then just get all your healing cooldowns out of the way, because that's the one where you actually need to heal a shitload.
Yeah.
Whereas for the other ones, you don't need to do any healing. And then you want to do that one again right at the end of the fight.
Yeah, when all of your healing cooldowns are back up.
Exactly, yeah. As for what you do in between then, I guess it kind of doesn't matter.
Not
really.
a whole lot. The only thing that you could argue is that, of course, you do need to keep killing the ad that's spawned by the speaker, and that ad can be pretty difficult to kill when it's inside the Trident of Deep Ocean shield. So if you don't have DPS cooldowns for that point, which we didn't have for one of our pulls when we did that, we couldn't get through the shield, we all got feared, the shield didn't break, and then we just died. So then again, the whole testing for this boss, which actually put a bit of a sour taste in my mouth. When we first did this boss, I didn't particularly like it. It's only when I go back and look at footage and kind of like relearn the encounter by looking at things afterwards that I'm actually like, this fight is really cool, but when playing it, something felt wrong. It was probably because we had no gear and testing was terrible.
Oh yeah, I was going to say, it was probably tainted because we were downscaled to, I think, 385 item level.
Yeah.
And, I mean, this is a heroic boss, which is arguably just above Jaina heroic.
Yeah.
So you're probably going to have like 400 going into this. Like,
Something
they'd
along
expect
those
the
lines.
majority of people to have around 400 going into this. And on top of that, like, the testing was screwed. I mean, most people couldn't even see the floor.
Yeah, that was fun, the first test of
Yeah.
that. And the second test, you constantly got disconnected, which is fun. But going back to the encounter for a second, going back to the whole idea of talking about these choices and the risk and reward, the Promises of Power debuff, although it's only one mechanic, I really think that's going to be a big key to Mythic, at least. On Heroic and Normal mode, you can kind of get by with not really using it. It's not going to be scaled
You're probably
to the
not
point.
going to need to optimize it to the point where you have, say, like 5 members of your raid, or maybe more than that, needing that debuff to actually break through those shields or kill those ads in time.
I think you're pretty much just going to bung it on some DPS that are really going to love having it. So something like Shadow Priest as an example, or certain Warlock builds, maybe Boomkins and Shamans, that kind of stuff. You might just lob it on a couple of those on Heroic, maybe 1 or 2 people, or however many healers you have. So 1 healer per debuff or something, so they can just dispel it safely at those points. You might do something along those lines. But on Mythic, like, that buff is so big that you want to use it as often as possible.
Well, it's going to be interesting to see how they tune it. They tune it so those shields are like ridiculous and you need to have 10 debuffs on the raid, or even the entire raid needs to be debuffed and you need to be like super smart with like mass dispelling small clumps of people. But the thing is, it does say in the dungeon journal that when it is dispelled on Mythic, it does like, what, 70k damage?
It's a lot. Yeah.
That's pretty damn high.
You could always revival and then just hit res them.
I like that.
Just bring loads of monks.
Wild first method, they're going to use 4 fucking monks.
4 monks, and then you battle res them, so you get 2 for free, and then the other ones you just slowly lose monks throughout the fight. But no, like, generally speaking, that whole idea, the entire instance is just based, you can see it in the items as well, which lots of people have covered. The whole items are based on risk and reward, and like the fact that that's also in the boss mechanics themselves, and it's also in the last boss's abilities as well, which we're going to be covering in the next video. It's kind of oozing that theme throughout of it, which is really nice. You know, so they're obviously pushing this idea in this instance, and so far it seems to be working out quite well. We'll have to see exactly how hard it is to see if you even need to do it in the first place, though.
Yeah, and I'm hoping that maybe we do see some of that. It'll be interesting to see if this instance is actually going to be, you know, 100 pull bosses.
We'll have to find out.
But thanks for watching, guys. If you enjoyed this little boss preview, then do drop us down a like. As always, we'll have an updated live guide for you when this boss comes out in a couple of weeks' time. And make sure you stick around on the channel. There'll be a preview for the last boss coming very soon. But thanks for watching, guys, and we will catch you all in the next one.
Thanks for watching.
Thanks for watching.